Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle. And today, we're going to talk about memes. Now, we don't talk about memes very often because I guess we're not hip like that. But today, we're going to talk about a specific meme. A meme being a thing that's like a cultural phenomenon that's happening on a social media app. And in this case, it's TikTok, right?
You tell me, because I've literally never been on TikTok. I didn't even know it was spelled with a K until recently.
Right. Okay.
Somebody corrected me and it was embarrassing.
Well, now you know. So this is happening on
Sounds so old.
I don't really go on TikTok very often either, but Derek loves TikTok. And so he'll often watch TikTok to relax. And so he's always has his finger on the pulse of whatever it is everyone is doing. And a while back, because this is October, this is back in September, but he mentioned this to me that the trend at the moment was women asking the men in their lives how often they thought about the Roman Empire. And so just to give you an example, I put together a small montage of just a random smattering of different people answering that question. All right, so why don't we take a listen first?
Okay.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Honestly, at least 3 or 4 times a week.
No, you don't.
I'm serious.
Dead serious?
Yeah. Either about their armor, their swords, their roads, their armies.
You're making this up.
I'm not even kidding.
Have you seen TikTok?
No. What?
You legit do. You think about the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, and I see stuff on TikTok a lot too. You know, but
You
what?
What do you think about?
I just told you. I listed off a bunch of stuff.
How often / ever do you think about the Roman Empire?
Not crazy often.
But
Yeah,
like-
I think more than the average adult,
Really?
but not often. I'd say, I don't know, probably like 3 or 4 times a week. I think about it.
You're kidding.
Oh,
No, you don't.
why?
What do you mean 3 or 4 times a week you think about the Roman Empire?
Well, a lot was going on back then. The Roman Empire was going on in times of the Bible. Talk about Roman Empire in the way they settled disputes, gladiators, 2 people in a coliseum and said fight to the death. I think about like concepts or things that came from like that time of the Roman Empire. But it's like I'm thinking about who the ruler was. What am I going on and on about what kind of question is this?
I've never thought about the Roman Empire.
Never.
Never.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Why do you think about the Roman Empire?
It's a very interesting time. You
Well,
don't think so?
It's blowing my mind.
Well, you never think about it. What do you think about then?
Not the Roman Empire.
I feel like the average person thinks about it, 3 times a month.
No, I would say the normal thing is just, why are we thinking about the Roman Empire?
Why are you not?
I have no idea.
Well, like, what about like other ancient civilizations? What do you think about?
I don't think about them.
Really?
Yes. Every guy thinks about the Roman Empire very often. It's bizarre. Like, why?
Wait, no.
No, I thought
Really?
for sure you were not going to think about the Roman Empire. Are you kidding?
So do you ever think about the Roman Empire? Like, how often do you think about it, the Roman Empire?
Probably like once a day.
The Roman Empire?
Yeah.
You think about it once a day?
Yes.
Why?
I think mainly about the piping system,
Yeah.
like the sewage and the drainage.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
More often lately than I would say ever before. That's a weird question. Wasn't expecting that one, but oddly enough, I was actually doing some research on the Roman Empire a few months ago, just making sure that, I was just making sure there's a lot of things going on here and around the world. Empires only have a certain amount of time that they can stay on top. So, I'm a historian over here. So just doing some research. That's all, okay? That's all.
Tiffany, you haven't actually seen any of these videos. So I want to layer on one thing that I also find surprising about these videos, besides the fact of how men were answering about how often they thought about the Roman Empire. One of the things that I love about these videos universally is that when a woman comes up to them and says, hey, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? The guys almost always give her a look that's a kind of look of surprise and also like they've been caught and somehow she's gotten into the deep secrets of their mind. You know, it's like this kind of alarmed look like, what? What do you mean?
Interesting.
As if she was a mind reader of some kind. And I can't really describe the look as much as I'd like to, but that's part of what I think was the charm of these videos, was that kind of surprise look like I had gone through your closet and I knew all your secrets. And one of your secrets was that you were always thinking about the Roman Empire. I mean, we also have to take into account that this is TikTok, so a lot of these people are young. In the videos, they look like they're in their 20s, 30s. Not to say that I haven't seen videos that are people in their 60s and 50s answering the same question.
Where does stuff like this even start? I guess I don't understand trends. It's social media trends, because I'm like, who started this trend? Because it's so random.
Right. And I mean, also there was someone I included in there that obviously has a British accent, but I don't know if that person's in the United States.
Sounded Australian to me.
Could have been Australian, could have been British. I made the montage so long ago, I now can't remember. But I don't know, is that person actually in Australia or in Britain, or is that person in the United States? A lot of these people seem like they're in the United States, which also could color our discussion about why people are thinking about the Roman Empire. But I did have you ask Claudio the question of how often he thought about the Roman Empire, because I wanted the perspective of somebody who had grown up in Rome who was also male. And you recorded him, although you say it's in Italian. So are we going to play a little bit of him talking? And
we can play a little bit. First of all, I should say that Claudio hates to be put on the spot. He refuses to be put on the spot. So when I pulled out the phone and I said, I got to ask you a question and I'm going to tape it, he said, no. First, you have to tell me what the question is. So I said, okay. And I told him what the question was. And then he started talking and I was like, no, you don't understand. I should be taping this. Half of the interesting stuff that he said, I didn't get to tape. So finally I pulled it out again. And plus he's eating. He's kind of eating at the time. So it's not the best recording, but here, go ahead. It's in Italian.
All right, here we go.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Allora, il Roma imperiale, io non distingo Roma imperiale, cioè può essere la Roma dei re, la Roma repubblicana o la Roma imperiale, quindi tutta la storia di 2000 anni di Roma, almeno una volta al giorno. Uno, perché lavoro in un museo, e due, perché qualsiasi cosa che sta attorno a un italiano richiama almeno una volta al giorno l'antica Roma per qualche motivo.
I think anyone who lives in Rome has to think about it at least every time he walks around the center of Rome.
Probabilmente, almeno una volta al giorno ti viene in mente.
I think you probably think more than once a day.
Probabilmente io più di una volta. Basta leggere i tombini delle fognature, c'è scritto SPQR ed è rimasto da 2000 anni. Quindi già per quello dovresti pensarci almeno una volta.
All right, so translate for us.
The first thing that he says, and this is what he said to me in much more detail before I started taping, was he's like, well, are you talking about only the Roman Empire, or are we talking also about the Roman Republic, the Archaic period? Ancient Rome is so much vaster than the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is just when there were emperors, starting with Emperor Augustus in 27 BC, and ending with the fall of the empire. But before that there was the very long period of the Roman Republic, when there was no emperor. It was ruled by consuls and senators and such. And then even before that there was the Roman, there was the kings, the monarchy, which is kind of a legendary period that we don't have that much actual historical fact about. So he wanted to specific. He's like, are you talking about just the empire, just Augustus to whatever the name of the last guy was? Or can we talk about the whole ancient Rome? I finally said, I don't know, just whatever. And so
you're like, here is the question. How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so basically then I asked it again. And he said, the very first thing he says, well, I'm not going to distinguish between the imperial period and the Republican period. I'm just going to talk about ancient Rome. And yes, obviously, I think about ancient Rome every single day. I work in a museum that is full of ancient Roman antiquities. It would be impossible for me not to think about it every day. And pretty much any Italian, and of course, I said Roman, more so a Roman, but all over Italy, there are traces of ancient Rome. It's not just in the city of Rome. any Italian who lives in Rome and walks around, I mean, the ruins are everywhere around you. It's impossible not to think about it. And then the last thing he says is, all you have to do is look down and see the cover of a sewage drain area. I don't know even what that's called.
Manhole cover.
Like a manhole cover. It says SPQR, which of course is, these manhole covers are modern, but they are imprinted with the motto of ancient Rome, which was, this belongs to the people in the Senate of Rome.
Right. Yeah. So I guess in that case, I mean, this is a question directed toward men. And as you heard, a lot of the women in those clips were like, I never think about the Roman Empire. But for you, Tiffany, how often?
I think about it all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, how often do you think you think about it? Yeah.
Because I work as a tour guide. If I just lived in Rome, especially if I lived in the outskirts like I do, I don't know that it would be constantly on my mind. But I work in tourism. So if I'm doing a tour, if I'm talking about a tour, if I'm answering an email from a client about where we're going to go on our tour, if I'm writing, creating a new tour, like there's always Roman stuff in there. Even if it's my Caravaggio tour, we pass by the mausoleum of Emperor Augustus on the tour, and it's part of the tour. So, it's going to come up. You can't get away from it. And I write for a magazine that is also about Rome. And so again, I'm either writing or translating an article that has something to do with ancient Rome, usually at least one per month. And so I think about it all the time.
Do you feel like you have to think about the Roman Empire too much?
Kind of. I'm not really that's not my passion. Ancient history is not my passion. I'm much more interested in the 14 and 1500s if I had to choose a time period that is the most fascinating to me. But I mean, it's not like I don't like it. It's just, sometimes it gets a little bit dreary.
Yeah.
But what I was interested, because I think that you can't really this question doesn't really work if you live in Rome, especially if you work somehow connected to the tourism of Rome. It just doesn't work. But I was really surprised that all of these men, and I mean, I only heard 4 excerpts. So it was definitely surprising that all of these guys who sound like, regular Joes are thinking so often, if they're telling the truth about the Roman Empire or ancient Rome. And I love the guy who talked about, there are 2 guys that I really liked their answers. One of them was the guy who talked about sewage.
Yeah.
Because you may or may not know that sewers are one of the 3 great Roman inventions.
What are the other 2?
The other 2 are aqueducts and concrete. 3 most important Roman inventions that changed humanity. So, I mean, I like the fact that the guy, has awareness of this. But I thought it was also very interesting, the guy who was like, I got to know, where we're headed.
Yeah.
Because, we're the big, powerful empire now. But it really feels like, and I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, but it really feels, especially in the last couple of years, like America, is in the decline period. It has that same feeling of, not that I was living, in ancient Rome during the decline, but it has that same feeling of decadence. We use the word decadence. This is one of those words that the definition has kind of changed along the way. Like we talk about decadence when we talk about like an amazingly rich dessert, or when we talk about like luxury that's like kind of over the top. But the real meaning of the word decadence is like when something is decaying, or when it's crumbling, when it's falling, when it's like the decline of Rome. It's the decadent. It comes from decadere, to fall. And I just feel like we are so in that moment where everyone's just like high on the hog and, riding this thing as long as it'll last. But like the end is right over the next hill. And we're all going to just go crashing into, whatever big, huge disaster is waiting for us, whether it's meteorological or economic or whatever it is.
Or just that the U.S. isn't the biggest power in the world.
It could be just political. It could be totally a political crisis. But something, like the guy said, all empires end. No empire in history has ever continued its power indefinitely.
Yeah, I would agree that the U.S. is on the downward swing of it being the one that's quote unquote in charge of the world, and and that the high point was probably following World War One, maybe into the 70s, and around then.
World War II.
Sorry, that's what I meant. World War II into the 70s, and then started the slow decline from there. That would be my guess. But anyway,
I agree.
So in picking 4 clips, I was trying to pick both for interest and also for variety. Everybody I was seeing who was answering this question was either black or white. I didn't find anybody who was Hispanic or Asian. Granted, I didn't spend hours looking at this either, but so I picked 2 white people and 2 black people, and the 2 black people are the people whose opinions you thought were the most interesting. But I will also say that that's another thing that maybe we don't want to get into, but in answering this question too, how much of it would be a racial question if you're in the United States. But there were a smattering of people who were saying, I never think about it. And usually they were not white people. They were not white men. I thought that was interesting too. But I think that with this largely being if let's say hypothetically, not knowing this trend as well as Derek does, if this is largely a question that's asked to American men, I find that to be interesting, and I do wonder how much of that has to do with the perception that the United States is supposed to be the most powerful, the perception that it does seem to be in decline, and that the Roman Empire, quote unquote, is what we look to see, like, how could the fall occur? But I don't know. Like, I think they're equally as interested in war and in the soldiers
swords,
and the
capes.
swords, the capes.
I think about their capes. I think about their swords.
I think about their armies. I think about Caesar. I mean, I think one of the biggest cases for regularly thinking about the Roman Empire is if you're a Christian also, because the Bible is full of stuff about the Roman Empire. So if you were going to church every single week or studying the Bible, I could definitely see why Christian men would be thinking about the Roman Empire on a regular basis, because all the stories around Jesus are about that same era.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same. I wonder if I'd ask my father this. And I'm like, yeah, he would have been thinking about it for sure, because he's reading Romans, he's reading the book of Romans.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it is interesting. And I do think, not that this is the topic of our episode, but I do think it is very interesting to look at the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, for clues and search that for clues. One of the most interesting that I've ever come across is that you can date the beginning of the decline of Rome to the period in which they started outsourcing olive oil. Italy, of course, as you know, is like incredibly rich with olive trees, and probably the best olive oil in the world comes from Italy. The Greeks might say Greece, but most people would say Italy has the best olive oil. And they started importing it from Spain in a certain, I don't know exactly the date, probably sometime in the early 3rd century or something. And that is the point at which, and I'm not saying that's the cause, but that happens to correlate with the beginning of the decline, when they started importing olive oil from Spain instead of making it in Italy. And I thought, that is really, really interesting, because one of the issues, of course, in the States is, this reliance on foreign goods, and it's so prevalent.
We have the Made in America brand here because, it's trying to encourage people to buy from American manufacturers rather than. But I actually, for years on my desk when I worked at NPR, I had been given a United States flag pin by some guest that had come to the station. And it
was made in China.
It was still in its plastic bag, and the plastic bag was printed with "Made in China." And I had left it in the plastic bag and tacked it up in my cubicle because it just seemed so symbolic.
It's perfect irony.
We're not even making our own flag pins anymore. But that's not to say that we are not making American goods. We are. But in many cases, we do think that foreign goods are superior or more affordable.
Yeah, I think it's because they're more affordable.
More affordable. And of course, income inequality over here is off the charts. We are currently as unequal income-wise as we were during the Gilded Age at the beginning of the 20th century.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That is insane.
So we're back to the
I did not know
Rockefellers,
that.
but the Rockefellers are now named like Bezos and Elon Musk, yes. So yeah, we're back to that same era financially.
That is shocking.
The middle
I
class
knew it was
is
bad. I didn't realize it was that bad.
It is that bad.
It's so funny. I remember watching a movie with my mom when I was a young girl. It took place back in that time, and the young women were, I don't know, getting ready, or and they had their servants and they had their furs and they had their jewels and the huge mansion and chauffeurs, and I was like, how did people live like that back then? And she was like, oh honey, because the rich people didn't have to pay taxes back then.
They also weren't paying their workers very well. I mean, I could go on and on and on about how many unfair practices there were. But yes, I love your mother's opinion.
But no, I mean, it's funny because she's not liberal
yes,
by any stretch of the imagination. But no, but I mean, I never forgot that. I was like, oh, thank goodness it's not like that anymore, because that's so unfair. I mean, I as a child didn't know the intricacies of the situation. But I was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Why would the poor people have to pay taxes and the rich people not have to pay taxes? That makes no sense. And here we are.
Yeah. So okay. So the beginning of the fall of the quote unquote Roman Empire is the importation of olive oil. What would you say, if it's at all possible for you to say, what would you say is the middle?
Oh gosh, no, that's beyond my pay grade.
Okay,
Katie.
what's the very end then? What is the final?
Well, I always say
nail of the coffin?
I always say that's the word. It is the exact expression that I use when I'm on my tour: the destruction of the aqueducts, the final nail in the coffin. Rome had already fallen. The center of the Roman Empire was not even, like, the capital of the Roman Empire wasn't even Rome anymore. It was, it had been moved around. It had been Ravenna for a while. It was Milan for a while, but that it was still considered on its feet, stumbling. But by the time the aqueducts were cut, and I can't remember the exact year, but it's in the 5th century, that was like the official end, the land had occurred. But it's the final nail. It's like when the Romans had no more water, that was it. That's when the city started to become abandoned, because it was become unlivable.
And yet to this day, are they the longest running empire in the world? Or does China have that?
I don't know those facts, but 27 BC to 476 AD. So how many years is that? That's about 500 years.
Yeah, about
like
500
almost
years.
exactly.
Yeah. So if the United States is indeed on the downward slope, then Rome is going to trounce us by hundreds of years, a couple hundred
also
at least.
Because, America has been a country since 1776, but how long have we been a quote unquote empire? I don't know.
No, that's a good question. Like, when does the beginning of the empire begin?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't actually know. Some historian, please do write us and tell us when that occurs. I mean, another thing about this meme that I would say slightly reinforces some male-female stereotypes as well, where, the guys are like, I think about the Roman Empire 7 times a day, and the woman is saying, I never think about it. I think there's...
And not only that, I don't think about any ancient civilizations ever. I'm like...
ever. Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, again, just a smattering of what's out there. But what is the stereotype it's reinforcing? That, because it's not necessarily that if you regularly think about the Roman Empire that you're a deeper thinker somehow than a person who doesn't regularly think about the Roman Empire. So I don't know. I just felt like watching it. I felt like this is reinforcing a stereotype, but then I couldn't put my finger on like what stereotype. That men are obsessed with war, that men are obsessed with like...
could be war. It could be the war thing, because the Romans, like, that's a specific, it's a specific ancient peoples. It's not, I think about the ancient Phoenicians every waking moment. No one's no one's claiming unless you're like a scholar of the ancient Phoenicians, that you think about them all the time. Maybe Egyptians are pretty fascinating, but the Romans have the war thing. They are the ones who were the great warriors, and that's what they're remembered for. That's what I would guess, that men are into war. They're into, as little boys. I look at my own little boy, he's into war, he's into soldiers, he's into tanks. So I guess it's just more appealing to them. Whereas, maybe women are thinking more about, I don't know, Botticelli in the Renaissance. I don't know, maybe that's more that's more their speed.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I certainly think more about Rome in the Renaissance than I think about ancient Rome. I know that that's for certain. I definitely think about the characters and the ideas of the Renaissance more than I think about armies marching under flat pine trees. But, not that I never think about it, but, but I think it's also the surprise in these videos. Like when the guys say, one, it's the women being surprised that they think about it all the time. It's the men also being surprised that, like, wait, you don't think about this all the time? It's like, it's a plague in their own mind. Like, I can't stop myself from thinking about the Roman Empire. Like, how can you be a person who's free from thinking about the Roman Empire on a regular basis? So before we got...
I'm just trying to like imagine these guys. Like, I'm trying to imagine the thought process, because I think about it because I'm constantly coming up against it and I'm constantly being confronted with it, or I have to learn about it to be able to write something or do a tour. But I mean, these guys, I'm just sort of like visualizing them like toweling off after a shower and just like staring up into space, thinking about a march of Romans. So I'm like, when does this thinking happen? Like, is it when they're falling asleep? Is it when they're, I don't know, what moment of the day when they're driving are they thinking about it? Like, when does it come up in their minds?
I mean, I guess throughout the day, or at least a couple times a week.
It's just weird. It's just weird to me. Well, not that it's weird to me that you would think about it, but it's like, if someone asked me, like, how often do you think about, I don't know, like something historical, that I'm like, yeah, it might come up if I'm like, if I open a book or if I see something that reminds me of it, but like, do I just think about it out of nothing? Does it just like come uncalled for to the front of my consciousness? I don't know.
I mean, now that you've mentioned concrete, of course, I knew that the Romans came up with concrete, but I don't walk around seeing concrete and thinking, you know what? Ancient Romans. But now that we've talked about it, I might walk past the construction site 3 houses up, see them pouring concrete and be like, you know what? Ancient Rome.
Thank you, Romans. Thank you.
Yeah.
Every time you flush the toilet, thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we should leave it there. But if you want to answer the question, feel free to send us an email.
Feel free.
bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. That's bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. Support the show by wearing a Bittersweet Life t-shirt or socks or even a Bittersweet Life face mask. We have merch, and you might find your new favorite mug by visiting thebittersweetlife.net. Click on support to explore the merch catalog. And have fun.